Let's start with please do not harm a toad. This is for educational purposes of what was written in an over 100-year-old spellbook. 1. It would be the craziest expedition to gather said toad considering what is required. 2. Toads and frogs are important elements to our ecosystem. And finally, 3. There are better ways to avoid plague if you get my point. I'll be popping back and forth between his exact words and my explanation as spark notes of the spell without losing details. Let's start on page 100. Preservative amulets as a splendid process for making an amulet against the plague is as follows. In the month of July, in the decrease of the moon, otherwise known as waning moon, go find a toad whose eyes were filled with worms. That would be a parasite that primarily lives in the waters of Florida. Inspire the toad to vomit insects by hanging it upside down. Please, let's not. With toads and frogs, they actually eject their entire stomachs when they ingest the wrong foods through a process of full gastric eversion. Frogs and toads wipe the stomach clean with their front feet to remove any stray bits, then packs the whole thing back into its body, where it will stay unless the frog eats another noxious item. He then states to remove the vomit from the toad, then dry out the remaining toad through, I'm guessing, sun drying or baking, then grind the remains into a powder. My question is, if you're going to essentially cremate the toad, why did you traumatize it by hanging it until it vomited? Unless, which isn't stated in the book, you want the wet contents of the vomit mixed with the dry of the toad. As if this poor parasitic toad hadn't already seen enough plague itself. Then this guy comes along with some strange looks in his eye. Next step is to take your toad powder and bug vomit and mix it with a teaspoonful of temple incense. After you've mixed, you pour these elements into a wax mold, most probably beeswax. I formed the whole into small cakes about 2 inches across, which being bound above the left breast of your sick patient, drove speedily away all contagion. And best friends too, I'm thinking. And being fast bound to the place affected, thoroughly drew out the poison. He found them to be the most powerful amulet used for these purposes, and even more so once it aged. The poison of the rheumatism and fever is subdued by the poison of the toad for the opposition of the amulet from the body of the toad takes away and prevents the baneful and most horrible effects of the pestilential poison and ferment of rheumatism. It happens that a poison ariseth in the toad, which kills the pestilent poison of terror in man. He not only sees the pestilence being extinguished in himself, but moreover, because he knoweth that something inferior to himself is terrified, dismayed, and doth fly. He equates in his writing that toads and snakes are the lowest creatures because toads eat dirt and snakes are attached to sin. Poor maligned creatures. My advice, do none of the above. Eat lots of veggies and herbs that bolster your body against illness. This man clearly did not get the note about do no harm because he tortured a little sick critter to scare the sickness out of man. Sounds more like a curse than a cure to me. What do you think? Tell me in the comments.